What up, though? This is a clipping. It says, Colored men wanted, bounty, $602, cash down, 350, besides state and United States pay. Recruits will be mustered into colored regiments. Apply to James S. Henry at Recruiting Office, 2nd and Bridge Avenue, Camden, December 23rd, 1863. That was a clipping from 1863 calling for colored men, or properly American Indians, or Americans, or Amerindians, to sign up to fight. National Park Service, Abraham Lincoln Birthplace, National Historical Park, Kentucky, Abraham Lincoln Autobiography. So again, the clipping calling for Americans to come help in the fight. It's 1863, Abraham Lincoln Autobiography. June 1858, Abraham Lincoln wrote 3 autobiographies in a 2-year period, prepared at the request of Charles Landman. Born February 12th, 1809, in Hardin County, Kentucky. Education defective, profession a lawyer. One of my second great grandparents, a couple of my second great grandparents were born in Kentucky in 1842. Two of my third great grandparents were born in Kentucky. No, actually, they weren't born in Kentucky, but my second great grandparent was born in Kentucky in 1842. Born February 12th, 1809, in Hardin County, Kentucky, and they were not slaves. Education defective, profession a lawyer, postmaster at a very small office, 4 times a member of the Illinois legislature, a member of the lower house of Congress. December 20th, 1859, Lincoln wrote this second autobiography for Jesse Fell, a longtime Illinois Republican friend who was a native of Pennsylvania. My parents were both born in Virginia. Interesting, because my third great grandparents, the parents of the second great grandparents that I was telling you about, the second great grandfather I was telling you about, they were born in Virginia. And if you really think about it, Virginia, West Virginia, Kentucky, all the same place. We think they're different. Well, some think they're different because of the lines on the map. My paternal grandfather, this is Abraham Lincoln, my paternal grandfather, Abraham Lincoln, immigrated from Rockingham County, Virginia to Kentucky about 1781. A year or two later, he was killed by Indians, not in battle, but by stealth, when he was laboring to open a farm in the forest. His ancestors, who were Quakers, went to Virginia from Berks County, Pennsylvania. My father grew up literally without education. He removed from Kentucky to what is now Spencer County, Indiana, in my 8th year. It was a wild region with many bears and other wild animals still in the woods. Yeah. I was raised to farm work, which I continued till I was 22. If any personal description of me is thought desirable, it may be said I am in height 6 feet 4 inches nearly, lean in flesh, weighing on an average 180 pounds, dark complexion with coarse black hair and gray eyes, no other marks or brands recollected. June 1860. See, when you know where, if you know where your people were during this time, you know where you are in this story. You know where your people were in this story. You don't just have to rely on his story. You can fall back on your own story. June 1860. When Lincoln first ran for president, John L. Scripps of the Chicago Press and Tribune asked him for an autobiography to write a campaign biography about him. Abraham Lincoln was born February 12, 1809, then in Hardin, now in the more recently formed county of LaRue, Kentucky. When he was 19, still residing in Indiana, he made his first trip upon a flat boat to New Orleans. He was a hired hand merely, and he and son of the owner, without other assistance, made the trip. It says he was a hired hand merely, a hired hand. Most of the people who you would consider slaves were in fact hired hands. The nature of part of the cargo load, as it was called, made it necessary for them to linger and trade along the sugar coast. And one night they were attacked by seven Negroes with intent to kill and rob them, or several Indians, American Indians, with intent to kill and rob them. But they don't call them Indians because of their appearance, facial features, attitude, countenance, the way they walk, the way they talk. And one night they were attacked by 7 Negroes with intent to kill and rob them. They were hurt some in the melee, but succeeded in driving the Negroes from the boat, or the American Indians from the boat, and then cut cable, weighed anchor, and left. March 3rd, 1837, by a protest entered upon the Illinois House Journal of that date at pages 817 and 818, Abraham, with Dan Stone, another representative of Sangamon, briefly defined his position on the slavery question, and so far as it goes, it was then the same that it is now. The protest is as follows. They believe that the institution of slavery is founded on both injustice and bad policy, but that the promulgation of abolition doctrines tend rather to increase than abate its evils. This is from the Irish Times. Ireland, Abraham Lincoln, The Ugly Truth, Harold Holzer. This was published in January 26, 2013. The German-born reformer Karl Schurz never forgot his first glimpse of Abraham Lincoln. It was 1858, the year of the great Illinois Senate debates between Lincoln and Stephen A. Douglas and Schurz. Nothing had prepared him for the sight of this remarkably homely, deeply furrowed, swarthy. Nothing had prepared him, Karl Schurz, for the sight of this remarkably homely, deep-furrowed, swarthy, haggard face of Abraham Lincoln, topped with a somewhat battered stovepipe hat. This is the Samuel Johnson's Dictionary of 1755. Swarthy. This is the way Karl Schurz described Abraham Lincoln upon seeing him at, I guess, what did he say? The Senate debates. The great Illinois Senate debates between Lincoln and Stephen A. Douglas. Schurz described Lincoln as swarthy. Samuel Johnson's Dictionary, 1755, defines swarthy as dark of complexion, black, dusky, tawny. 1828, Noah Webster's American Dictionary of the English Language defines swarthy as the complexion of men is universally swarthy or black. And then it says black as the swarthy African. Oxford English Dictionary, the online version, the subscription version. Swarthy, of a person's complexion or skin color, or of a person with reference to their complexion, relatively dark in color, brown, olive colored, or tanned, of a place predominantly inhabited by people with relatively dark skin. This is from 1572. So it says that of a person's complexion or skin color, or of a person with reference to their complexion, relatively dark in color, brown, olive colored, or tanned. Dark in color or tone, black or blackish. From 1577. The first one was from 1572. This is from 1577, so the same time. Dark in color or tone, black or blackish. No such thing as a black human. So we know they just mean dark brown, really dark brown. You know, there are people who are really dark. I mean, when we was growing up, it was people we called blackie, you know what I mean? But they was just really dark brown. OxfordLearnersDictionaries.com defines swarthy as especially of a person or their face having dark skin. Remember, this is how Karl Schurz described when he first saw Abraham Lincoln. This is from history. This is from history. The History Channel or history.com. The Short-Lived Promise of 40 Acres and a Mule by Nadra Kareem Niddle. published November 9th, 2022. The black leaders, no such thing as a black human. Who are they speaking of? Let's see if we can find out who they're speaking of. The black leaders gathered for the January 12th, 1865. Oh, we're talking 1865, so we're talking American Indians. We're talking Americans. The black leaders gathered for the January 12th, 1865 meeting. Well, maybe they're talking about American Indians. We have to see, because they could be talking about swarthy, or people who look like us, who are from Afro-Eurasia. Quite a few of those characters were here, as they are today. The black leaders gathered for the January 12th, 1865 meeting with the military officials in a mansion called in 1865. Did you think black leaders were meeting in mansions? Probably not. Called the Green Meldrum House. They explained that they didn't want to live among white people, as they feared it would take years for racial prejudice to dissipate in the South. This is 1865. This is supposed to be the time when a lot of times you hear this time is like when slavery was outlawed or deemed unlawful. I could be off by a few years or so, but 1865 rings a bell. Black leaders meeting with the military officials in a mansion called Green Meldrum House. They explained that they didn't want to live among white people, as they feared it would take years for racial prejudice to dissipate in the South. Instead, they wished to live among themselves on their own land. That would entail redistributing the land of Southern plantation owners. The way we can best take care of ourselves is to have land and turn it and till it by our own labor, or culture it, said the Reverend Garrison Frazier, a 67-year-old Baptist minister and spokesman for the group. We want to be placed on land until we are able to buy it and make it our own, Frazier told the Union military officials. Abolitionists Charles Sumner and Thaddeus Stevens had promoted the idea as a way to financially devastate Confederate landowners. Still, Harvard historian Henry Louis Gates Jr. credits Savannah's black leaders with spearheading the events that followed. After meeting with the 20 ministers, Sherman signed Field Order 15 on January 16th, 1865. So here we have slavery just ending, right? When I say slavery, I mean the slavery that's probably in a lot of people's minds, which is shackles on the neck, wrist, and ankles, whips on the back, yowza mouser, yowza. And that meaning that the people were weak and subservient, even though you call your supervisor your boss today. But this isn't the type of slavery that's in the minds of all those who think the shackles represents what slavery really was. In some circumstances, it meant trafficking. And then you were a captive. That would make you a captive. And I guess you would have to slave for someone. You wouldn't get paid for it. So I guess you really couldn't call that person who was trafficked a slave. I guess you would basically call them a captive. held against their will. Some might say, what you talking about? You don't think black people was held against their will if they was in jail? But see, your burden would be to bring up the information about the actual people who were held against their will. That's a little more difficult. But just because it's difficult don't mean that it can't be done. Just do it. After meeting with the 20 ministers, so these people, in our indoctrination, we would think, hey, these people were just coming out of slavery, but yet they're meeting at a mansion to say that we don't want to live with the whites. We don't want to live with the Anglo-Saxons. After meeting with the 20 ministers, Sherman signed Field Order 15 on January 16, 1865. The order would reserve 400,000 acres of Confederate land for members of the formerly enslaved population. When the land near the southeast coast was evenly redistributed, each family would have 40 acres of tillable ground. Now understand, when something is not in quotes, that means that the author of the article is putting together what he thinks or what he's gathered that has happened. So the terms that he is using are not necessarily the terms that were used at the time. It's not like we're looking at actual minutes of this meeting that they had in the mansions. We're not seeing those minutes of the meeting. Unless later on in this article it says the actual minutes from the meeting. Then this is the author's interpretation of the research that he did or what he or she read. I believe it was a woman. But yeah. This is a quote here. Union generals were attempting to divide these slave plantations into small farm settlements and make them available to the newly freed slaves, says Valerie Grimm, director of undergraduate studies, African American and African diaspora studies, and professor of African American and African diaspora studies at Indiana University, Bloomington. There we have it. We have a biased view. So take that into consideration when you are following along as we go through this particular article from history.com. Valerie Grimm is a director of undergraduate studies, African American and African diaspora studies. She's a professor. So she's been thoroughly indoctrinated. And from my own, just from what I think, is that there is some benefit to her labeling the people African Americans, which they are not African Americans. The people who she is terming African Americans are American Indians. Or if you just want to say Americans, that's even better. As a matter of fact, if you just want to go crazy with it, how about you call them what they called themselves? The freedmen set out to begin working their new land immediately, with a group of 1,000 settling on Georgia's Skidaway Island. In subsequent months, as many as 40,000 freedmen settled on the redistributed land. The land wouldn't have to be redistributed if Anglo-Saxons, Afro-Eurasians, Caucasians, Romans, Chinos would never have come here in the first place. They were able to parcel it out to some of the former slaves. And mind you, you know there is deception when you're so adamant about calling people slaves. They aren't even people. They aren't even human. They're slaves. They're this name. Slaves, they're not Slavs. They're not Slavic people. Maybe they are. But they said black people. So I'm assuming that they're not the Slavs, the Slavic people from Europe. But how disrespectful to not even call people what they call themselves, to call them slaves. You think these people don't know what them people called themselves? Yeah, they do. Everyone else around the world, everyone else on the planet knows. But for the most part, this dream was never realized, Graham says. The government didn't keep its promise of 40 acres and a mule. Following President Abraham Lincoln's assassination on April 15, 1865, President Andrew Johnson rescinded Field Order 15 and returned to Confederate owners the 400,000 acres of land, a strip of coastline stretching from Charleston, South Carolina to the St. Johns River in Florida, including Georgia's Sea Islands and the mainland 30 miles in from the coast. Ah, those foreigners. This is from the Daily Mail online. Jasmine Crockett mocked for wildly hypocritical comment about Doge checks for Americans by James Crone or James Cerrone for Daily Mail, published February 2025. Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett has been accused of hypocrisy for dismissing the idea of distributing $5,000 Doge checks to Americans when she has previously favored some form of reparation payments. Jasmine Crockett says, "We are not in the business of giving out money, and honestly, I don't know what $5,000 will do for you if you are unable to find a job, because I am telling people we are headed toward a recession." She says, "We are not in the business of giving out money." When she says we, I assume because I guess she's a state representative, right? I guess she's speaking of the quote government, end quote, are not in the business of giving out money. That means they're just in the business of taking your stuff, of taking your money. And when it's found out that they were, because they taking your money, they're stealing your money anyway. So the fact that it's being used in a way that's opposed to what they told you they were using it for, they want to redistribute it. They want to give it back to you because they said they've been finding a lot of money that's been stolen from the people. But she says they aren't in the business of giving out money, basically giving you back what you are owed or what was taken from you. And I understand because they don't print that much money to give you back what they've taken from you, because what they've taken from you can't be repaid with money, or should I say fiat currency, paper. Could it be that she said, we are not in the business of giving out money? Because if they're going to be in the business of giving the Americans, the real Americans, the only Americans there ever was, is, and will be, the people who they term Black Americans and African Americans falsely, the American Indians, if they get into the business of giving us back what they took, then paper won't have anything to do with it. It'll be soil portions. Actually, it won't even be that they'll be distributing out, as they call it, land. The only way they can repay us back what they've taken is to pack up their people and leave. And then she says, I don't know what $5,000 will do for you if you are unable to find a job. So if you're unable to find a job, she don't know what $5,000 will do for you. I mean, do we really have to tell her? If you unemployed, if you looking for a way to make some paper and take care of your people, take care of your family and whatnot, do you think we really have to tell her what $5,000 will do? Again, I'm not saying that $5,000 is what they've taken from us and what they owe. No, I just said it. What they owe is to leave. I'm talking all of them. But based on the words right here that we're looking at, if you don't have a job, $5,000 gonna help you do something. It ain't gonna last long. Any amount will help when you down. This is from Jasmine Crockett. This is Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett from Texas. She identifies as a Democrat, or she ran as a Democrat, I guess. Said she doesn't support the idea to redistribute 20% of the savings from cuts made by the Department of Government Efficiency. And let's be clear on something. It's not savings from cuts made. It's money that was being, it's an excessive amount of money that was taken from you. And they were talking about, it came up, it was in the media. They leaked it a little bit to the media just to get all of everybody talking, just to make everybody think that, we thinking about y'all. It's not 20% of the savings from cuts made. It's a super tiny fraction of what they took. And to be honest, I think that's all these people should be talking about right now. I don't think they should be talking about anything else. I don't think they should be doing anything else except talking about packing up their people and leaving. But of course, that won't happen. And of course, it would do you well to not live under the illusion that the occupier of your soil, that the body that governs you or controls you is going to do right by you. I mean, how could they? This is from Newsweek. Tax exemption for Black Americans suggested by Democrat. There's a lot wrong with this headline. Strong indicator that all these publications, that all these media companies are just participants in the elaborate show. A very elaborate show. A sensational show. Tax exemption for Black Americans now. Who is a Black American? It's no such thing as a Black human. So who is a Black American? Well, the people who are termed Black Americans or African Americans are the only Americans there ever was, is, and will be. A lot of so-called Black Americans who have no idea who their families are and don't care. I mean, it's not just people outside of my family, because a lot of my family members could care less. But a lot of people who call themselves Black Americans, African Americans, and all these other terms, they are quick to call anyone who's brown, anyone who shares their complexion, not even shares their complexion, but anyone who is termed a person of color. Anyone who is termed a person of color from all over the planet. The people who are termed Black Americans are quick to embrace them as Black Americans as well. So, this particular article says from Newsweek, it says tax exemption for Black Americans suggested by Democrat. Who's the Black American? Who's going to get the tax exemption? Or who did they have in mind when they were thinking of a tax exemption? Let's find out. By Alice Higham, U.S. News reporter. U.S. News reporter. It didn't say Newsweek news reporter. It says U.S. News reporter. Okay, that's real general. A Texas congresswoman suggested that descendants of slaves should be temporarily exempt from paying taxes as a way to distribute reparations. A Texas congresswoman suggested that descendants of slaves should be temporarily exempt from paying taxes as a way to distribute reparations. What is the date of this article again? Does it even say? Doesn't even say. Hopefully it'll say it later at the end. A Texas congresswoman suggested that descendants of slaves, right there, means you ain't getting shit. You not getting nothing. Descendants of slaves. What is a slave? The word slave is synonymous with worker, laborer, employee. If one of your great grandfathers or your great great grandfathers, your third or fourth or fifth great grandfather was the head of the household, everybody else in the house was considered as slaves. They was workers. They was working for him. It's synonymous with worker, laborer, employee. There's absolutely no way that they're going to establish who the descendants of slaves are or who the slaves were. You know why? Because it doesn't exist in the way that it was told to you. It don't exist. So this right here, all this is just to make a story. It's just to have the story. It's just so Newsweek continues to be Newsweek. It's content. But the Texas Congresswoman suggested that the descendants of slaves should be temporarily exempt from paying taxes as a way to distribute reparations. Democratic Representative Jasmine Crockett appeared on an episode of the Black Lawyers Podcast. Ain't that some Black Lawyers Podcast? Lawyers know what black mean, but they still call themselves Black Lawyers Podcast. Why? Because you'll tune in if it says black. Black Lawyers Podcast released on Tuesday, suggesting that one-way reparations could be paid to descendants of America's former slave trade is for the group to be given a reprieve from paying taxes for a certain amount of time. Now, I don't even want to talk about the whole slave trade. I don't even want to talk about slave. I don't want to talk about that. But look at what is said here. Given a reprieve from paying taxes for a certain amount of time. See what happens. So to govern means to control. See what happens when you support someone controlling you. See what happens? They think this means something to us. They think this is going to get you excited. So when you go to your job, right? When you go to your job, when you apply for the job, you make an agreement with that company. They're going to pay you this and you're going to work this many amount of hours. And they're going to pay you this. Cool. Shake on it. And then when you hold up your end of the bargain, you get your check. You get your compensation. And you thinking, hey, they ain't hold up their end of the bargain. They ain't give me what we agreed on. But they did. It's just that that body that you told to control you, they come in and they take some of it. Now, within that week before you got paid, or within that 2-week period that you got paid, they didn't call you. You didn't get a call and they said, I'm going to come in and I'm going to work this many hours for you and you pay me this. Nah, they didn't do that. They just took it. They just took it. And it's taxes. Think about when that first started happening. You think that wouldn't make somebody want to fight? I'm going to let you figure that out. I'm going to let you figure out what was the biggest fight because of that right there. And think about it. We still doing it today. So that fight that was had, who won that fight? Because we still doing it today. And ain't none of us fighting. The former civil rights and criminal attorney spoke of various ways reparations could be paid to living relatives of enslaved people. She said that she saw a celebrity whom Newsweek has been unable to identify suggests that black people should not have to pay taxes. Wait. She saw a celebrity say this. And so she adopted that mindset that black people, again, who are the blacks, should not have to pay taxes for an undetermined amount of time instead of being given money by a state or the federal government. She really got a problem with paying out money. She got a problem with that. She got a problem from putting money in your pocket. She got a real problem with that. She says, one of the things they propose is black folk not have to pay tax. She say black folk, trying to talk like whatever. One of the things they propose is black folk not have to pay taxes for a certain amount of time because that puts money back in your pocket. She said, no. Not paying taxes. It just says that y'all won't steal no more. That y'all stop stealing. That's all that say. It don't put money in our pocket. It just mean that y'all stop stealing. She said, if you do the no tax thing for people that are already, say, struggling and aren't really paying taxes in the first place, it doesn't really matter. Wow. She got a problem with putting money in your pocket, however it get put in your pocket. Earlier, she said she believed that reparations should go only to those who are descendants of slaves, not other black Americans. Again, who was a slave? If you've ever looked at census records, you would see that a lot of our people were, well, they had the marshals, the census enumerators, they had to fill in the category for occupation. So a lot of our people were considered farmers, which all that means is that our people were self-sufficient. They were taking care of themselves. So who is a slave? Well, could she be referring to, when they say slaves, could she actually be referring to Slavic people, to Europeans who came here in waves from the 1400s to the 1800s? Could she be speaking about those people? To be honest, I don't think she's speaking about nobody. I don't think she want nobody get no money but her. And when I say her, I mean her and the body that she's a part of, the political body that she's a part of. And when I say political body that she's a part of, let me make this clear. The corporation she's a part of, the United States, okay? Newsweek has contacted Crockett's press team via email for comment outside of normal working hours. This is something outside of normal working hours. This is something that definitely needs to be thought through. But when have people that aren't even willing to do the studies, aren't willing to invest to make sure that we can roll this out the right way, she said. This is something that definitely needs to be thought through. Thought through means 1,000 years, okay? Thought through is synonymous with 1,000 years. But when have people that aren't even willing to do the studies, aren't willing to invest to make sure that we can roll this out the right way, she said. That we can roll this out the right way. She is in the driver's seat. And is suggesting that a study be done to figure out how to give you some of your stuff back. Everybody hypothesizes about what reparations will do on both sides. And then there's a breakdown because one side says it's going to be the best thing since sliced bread. Ugh. Ugh. The whole best thing since sliced bread is just like bogus, man. The way she's talking. Because one side says it's gonna be the best thing since sliced bread. Ugh. The other side says it's gonna be disastrous. Instead of actually getting the data to show us these are the problematic parts, these are the not so problematic parts, and us actually crafting a thoughtful way forward. These are company people. More specifically, corporation people. More specifically, United States corporation people. Do the right thing.